Chapter 7, 8, 9, and 10 will make up the remaining part of Latin 101. So if you want to jump ahead, feel free to do so. There will be a third test at the end of November on chapters 7, 8, and 9. And then the final exam will be cumulative, including chapter 10. All right, let's jump into the topic, third declension nouns. What do we mean by that? Well, as you know, Latin is all about the endings. So we got to learn our I, I, otter, me, say, sis, us, I, o, ior, me, so, sis, blank, is, em, a, is, ibus, is, ibus. Here we're talking about third declension. Did the Romans use this grammar chart? No, they didn't. Just as most Americans, unless they learn a foreign language, would have a hard time explaining the grammar. Hence, Romans did the same thing as native speakers. They just knew how to speak it. So this is something that grammarians have put together over the centuries to identify patterns. There's always exceptions, but generally these are the patterns or endings of nouns as well as adjectives. So we need to learn that certain nouns of this class will take a third declension ending. So this will be a good opportunity to review the basic idea of a declension. So please read through this. I think this chapter is a good chapter because I think this is one of the keys to learning Latin is the noun declensions. And there are certain words that, as I mentioned a moment ago, that will just simply have to be memorized. Once again, how do we know what declension a noun belongs to? By its nominative and genitive. So this has been explained, also noted in the book earlier. So the reason here you look at a word like king, rex, like Tyrannosaurus rex. The reason we have a blank here is that the nominative, third declension nominative singular ending has 14 to 16 different endings. So it's just not practical to list them all. But you can see it's rex regis, so there is our genitive singular is. If we go back to our example here, you can see that the genitive singular is is. Same thing with these other ones. So look at the word for man, Homo sapiens, hominis, body, corpus corporis. And so blank is ema, is ibus, is ibus. And then we have some neuter nouns as well that need to be learned. So moving ahead here to, I don't know if this is all that important for our purposes, so we're going to skip that one. And yeah, we're actually going to go right into the examples. And so this chapter, as I've indicated throughout, you want to read through this, but the basic idea is nouns of the third declension, hence the title of the chapter. And you'll also want to do the self-tutorial exercises in the back of the book. Ultimately, once again, it's just learning that the vocabulary for this declension will always require a third declension noun. So I've said before, it doesn't matter how we use the word king. So if we go back to the example earlier, it's always going to have a third declension. So the king is good, rex bonus s. The son, the king's son, regis puer. The dative for the king, I'm giving something to the king. That's going to be regi. I see the king, regem radio. Justice administered by a king, that's going to be a rege. So as we said before, when we have these declension endings, they don't switch. So king will always be third declension. Words like amicus or friend will always be, in fact, here it is right here, will always be second. Words like ground or terra or earth will always be first. And so you'll start to recognize the patterns the more that you learn and study Latin. Okay, let's go into the examples here. So you want to go through the vocabulary. As noted, if you go to the Wheelock's website, they do have some audio files for these, but you can see amor, amoris. So here's the genitive singular ending in is. What does that mean? That it is third declension, amor, amoris. So again, the reason we say blank is we saw king with the letter X, but here we have ending with R. Well, that's why it is the third declension. Carmen, carminis, civitas, civitatis, corpus corporis, homo hominis, labor laboris. So all these words right here are third declension. Literae, literae is actually first declension. So litera, literae, so AAE. So mos moris, third declension. Nomen nominis, third declension. Pax pacis, third declension. Regain and reginae, first declension. Rex regis, we talked about that. Tempus temporis is third. Terra terrae is first. Uxor uxoris is third. Third, third, and then here we have a adjective and a preposition. So most of the vocabulary in this chapter, most of the nouns are third declension. In fact, we only have 2 verbs in the entire chapter. That's where we get words like audacious, audacity, audio, audere, also sum. What would this mean? I dare, to dare, I have dared, NACO, I kill, to kill, I have killed, to be killed. So these are our principal parts. So this chapter largely focuses on nouns. All right, so let's take a look at the Sententia Antiqua. Here we have Terence, somewhat of a comic writer. Again, we don't have the context here, but these are all based on classical sources. So homo sum, I am human. So that one's pretty straightforward. I am human. This actually is from a larger sentence that's pretty famous in Latin literature. Homo sum humani nihil me alienum puto. I am human, nothing human is foreign to me. Again, it sounds serious, but actually in the context, it's actually somewhat humorous, focusing on human foibles. So that was pretty straightforward. Now, man is third declension, but here we're just using it as a noun. And so, homo sum, I am human. Number 2, duo nihil sub sole novum, from the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament. Nothing new under the sun. So nihil novum. So that is nothing new under the sun. So let me write that down and then try to explain it in further detail. Nothing new under the sun. So here we have a good easy example of the third declension, because sole solis is, if we go back and look at our vocab, you can see, where is it here? Should be in here, I would think. Well, they don't have it here, but if you look in Whitaker's words, which I have queued up here, so you can see that it is sol solis third declension. So the third means third. So here's Whitaker's words is a good tool. So we go back now, because it's third declension. What is third declension ablative singular? Well, that is the letter E. So when we have under the sun, sub sole, that is because we need to use the third declension ablative singular ending. And so we put all together, nothing new, nihil novum, under the sun. In fact, they give us the vocab right here. Tres by Horace, great writer. Recommend him highly. Carmina nova dea adolescentia virginibus puriusque nunc canto. And this one's a little bit longer, so we got to go through our vocab here. So Carmina nova, new songs. That is a neuter noun. Again, we have to learn our vocab. So we need to make sure this is in the plural. How do we know that? Well, by learning our vocab, because it's karma, carminis, but it's a neuter noun. So we go to our third declension. There it is, the letter A, indicating the plural right there. So we go back to this. So new songs, and then day means about. Day is always followed by the ablative. So first declension ablative singular is A. But then here we have third declension ablative plural ibus. But then here we have second declension ablative plural is. This one has got a lot going on in this one. Again, you can, hopefully you have an easy reference to this right here. But if I go back and just explain it one more time, this is first declension ablative singular. There it is, A with the macron. Here we have ibus, so that is third declension ablative plural. So there it is, ibus right there. But then we have is, which is second declension ablative plural. There's is. Now why is that? Well, because we have 3 different nouns of different declensions. And so that sort of explains it. And then nunc means now, and then canto means to sing. So we put it all together is that now I am singing new songs about adolescence, and then I guess young maidens and boys. So we put it all together. We kind of need to come up with a slightly better translation. So now I sing. So let's try now I sing. Um, New songs about the adolescence of young girls and boys. Now, let me write this here. So now I sing new songs about the adolescence of young girls. Nowadays we would say teenagers, but the teenagers is more of a recent notion. So they didn't have the notion of teenagers in the ancient world. Probably a good thing. Um, so again, this one doesn't translate quite as well as some of the other ones, but that's why it's a foreign language after all. And a foreign language that's a couple thousand years old. But if we go back to, notice in English, we probably need to say of, but Latin has de, which is always followed by the ablative. And so it's just a question that the grammar in Latin requires the ablative. And so we need to keep it in the ablative case, although our English would require of, if for no other reason than English doesn't have cases. All right, so that was a meaty one. First two pretty easy. Number three a little bit trickier. Number four, laudes fortunam et mores antiquae plebis. So here, laudes, we had this in chapter one, but it's a verb, laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. But it ends in s. That means you, second person singular. So you praise the fortune and mores of the ancient people. So let me write that down and then I'll try to explain it in greater detail. So you praise the fortune. Now, fortune could mean happiness, and mores, which could mean customs of the ancient people. Once again, a little bit, what does that literally mean is that you often praise how people of old lived. But literally, when we say you often praised how people of old lived, that really doesn't tell us a whole lot. Whereas if we say fortune and mores, then we know the reason why you are praising them. So this is a case where actually, even though the translation sounds a little bit wooden, it's a little bit more vivid in terms of its meaning. Now let's talk about the grammar on this one. So we already noted that laudes is you praise, so we need to be able to recognize that as a verb with the second person singular. Once again, if we don't know it, we're going to have to take our time and look words up. And you can see here it tells us it's a verb. So, and then second person singular, that's what 2s means. So you praise, and then you praise what? Well, the fortune. So fortune is first declension accusative singular, so that's the direct object. So you praise, but then mores, what are mores? Like customs, but that is third declension accusative plural. So there's is. So that is the direct object in the accusative. But then we have literally of the ancient, and then plebs, here they have of the ancient common people. So notice that both antiquae and plebis are genitives. So antiquae is first declension, genitive, singular, and then plebis is third declension. So this is where you want to make sure you understand that antiquae is first declension. That's just how it is. Plebs, or people, is third declension. That's just how it is. So here we have mixed declensions, but we have the same case, because that is what Latin requires, because Latin is an inflected language. All right, moving on here. Boni propter amorum virtutis peccare od erunt. So here they give us a little bit of help here. So the good, so in other words, good people, because of a love of virtue, hate to sin. So let me write that down here. So the good, in other words, good people, because of a love of virtue, hate to sin. So let's go over this. So boni is, it means good and good people. So Cicero uses this a lot. So once again, if we're not quite sure what this is referring to, we have to kind of look. Here it is, like good people, men of honor, um, honest people. But we can verify this by the fact that boni is nominative. So it tells us it's a subject, because nominative is always the subject. So boni is the subject here. We need a subject. And then propter we've had before. It means because or on account of, but it's always followed by the accusative. So morem is third declension accusative singular. So there it is, em. So because of a love, you could also, I guess, say because of their love. But then of virtue, because virtue here is is. The genitive means of. So that's one of your vocabulary words. So good people are good human beings because of a love of virtue. And then od eront, hate. So remember, if it's in italics, that's our translation. And then what's the infinitive? To sin. And so that's where we get the word sin in Latin, something wrong with your heart or your interiority. All right, number 6, sub principe duro tempori bisque malis audes esse bonus. All right, this one is going to require slowing it down. This one can be a little bit tricky. Once again, probably one good strategy. We got to know the vocab, so you just got to look words up. So under, prince, hard, times, bad, you dare, be good. So this one, once you do that, which is kind of necessary, because if we don't know what the words mean, then we really can't do anything. But then they give us some further clarity. So princeps here is being used as the prince, so the person in charge. And then duros is hard or harsh, in other words, very strict. So we put that together as that under the harsh prince. So let's put that right there. So under the hard prince, in other words, he was very strict in his rule. So under the hard prince, you dare to be good. So you dare to be good under the hard prince. You dare to be good. But then this one's a little bit tricky, because then we have this temporibusque malis. But sub is always followed by the ablative. And how do we know that? Well, because we look it up. So it can mean accusative, but here it's being used in the ablative. This one is tricky because we have 4 ablative endings, because they're all determined by this preposition. So this is ablative, this is third declension ablative singular, this is second declension ablative singular, this is third declension ablative plural, and this is second declension ablative plural. So if you look here, we have principe, there's the letter E, but then we have duro, which, again, they've given us a word for it, but there it ends in the letter O, because that's the second declension. But then we have the ibus for the next one, so that's third declension. But then we have malis, which is second declension ablative plural. So this one's a little bit tricky because it just has a lot of ablative endings. Again, ablative generally is the hardest one. So we put all together is that under the harsh prince, and bad times. So we put that right there. So under the harsh prince and bad times. So in other words, that the times were bad. So you had a bad leader and you had a bad society, but nevertheless, yeah, it's easy to feel sorry for ourselves. The right thing to do is just we got to find people to overcome this somehow. Again, it's a little more complex than that, but you get the idea. Um, and so the idea here is that instead of people just giving in to tyranny and giving in to bad luck, well, let's do something about it. And probably takes a little bit of courage, a little bit of belief, a little bit of audacity, and some kind of goodness to overcome bad times. All right, so number 7, populus totus virus indignis honores saepe dat. So a stupid people often gives honors to unworthy men. How true is that, if I'm being honest, right? So stupid people often give honors to unworthy men. So stupid people often give honors to unworthy men. Let's take a look at this right here. So stupid people, stultus populus. So here is our us. So that's our subject. And then we had this in chapter 1, saepe dat, often give, and then give what? Give honors. So this is a third declension noun. So we go to our declension here. You can see that is accusative plural, is, that's the direct object. But then we're giving these honors to whom? That is the dative, so is. And so we're going to go back to our dative here, and then men. So is, so viris indignis, and to or for whom. And so there we go. Okay, yeah. Number 8, nomina stultorum in parentibus et portis semper vidimus. So let's see, this is by Cicero. Here we have wall of the building. And so the names of stupid people. So we often see the names of stupid people on the wall of a building and gates. So put that in here. So we often see the names of stupid people on the wall. Do they have that in the plural here? Let me see. The wall of a building is what they're saying here. So we'll follow that, fair enough, on the wall of a building and gates. So notice it doesn't like Google doesn't, or yeah, I guess it's the Google Doc doesn't like this grammar, but we're going to follow what they have here. So we're going to go with wall of a building. So how do we explain that? Is that we often see, so vedimus semper, and then see what? The names of stupid people. So nomina is a neuter noun. So we have to recognize this is, so if we look this up on Whitaker's Words, you can see that it is third declension. So nomen, nominis, names. So we look on third declension, nominative plural, or excuse me, accusative plural. The letter A is the ending, so there's the plural. So we got to be able to recognize that as the direct object because we already have the subject with we see. And then of stupid people, that's going to be second declension, genitive plural, aurum. So we often see the names of stupid people on a wall of a building and gates. Again, portis is gates. So if we're not sure about that, we just could say city gates, but that also is, as you can see here in the, let's see, I guess they're using it here. Yeah, so it's the object of on where. So this is going to be a dative of location. Or I guess it could be ablative as well. All right, so some tricky ones here that are really going to require. So the grammar is actually fairly straightforward in the sense that it's just one topic, third declension, but this is really a good time to tidy up your understanding of declensions. And of course, let me know if you have questions. Novum otium sine litteres mors est. So here's Seneca, the great Roman moralist. So leisure without letters is death. Now, what does he mean by letters? Is, reading and writing and thinking. So leisure without letters is death. So let's write that down here. Leisure without letters is death. Certainly, you can tell a lot about a person by what they do in their free time. Number 10, multi. Oh, let me explain this one a little bit better. So otium, that is a neuter noun, so that's the subject. And then sine is always followed by the ablative. So what is first declension ablative plural? Is. So there you go. You look right there. There it is, is. How do we know that sine it requires the ablative? Well, we do, and if we're not sure, we look it up. So there it is, preposition plus the ablative. And then going back to what the complement subject is mors means death, and then is death. In fact, they give us the meaning right here. So mors mortis is death. All right, decem multi nationes servitutem tolerare possunt, nostra civitas non potest, praeclere est recuperatio libertatis. This one is a long one here. So many nations, I guess, are they using nations here? Let me see, because that would be somewhat of an, okay. Nationalism, nationality, because nation state is more of a modern development. So many nations are able to tolerate servitude. So let me write, in other words, that many nations are seemingly, their people are happy to be in bondage. So many nations are able to tolerate servitude. So many nations, where is that right here? So many nations are able to tolerate servitude. Our state, so civitas, I think in this case is our state, in other words, the Roman state. Our state non potest. Our state is not able. In other words, our state is not able to tolerate servitude. So our state, the Roman state, is not able to, and again, the implication here is to tolerate servitude. All right, so that's sort of implied, just given the context. Our state is not able to tolerate. And then praeclera means noble. And then recuperatio, the recovery. So the recovery of liberty is noble. The recovery of liberty is noble. Now, of course, Cicero is writing at the end of the Roman Republic. So in his view, liberty isn't anything that needs to be refound or discovered. It's in one's reason or even in one's conscience. In Cicero's view, so if people are being honest with themselves, we know, according to Cicero, or certainly the Romans know whether or not they're living in a time of liberty and virtue or servitude and ignorance. Okay, number 11. Nihil sine magno labore vita mortalibus dat. So nothing without great work, life, to mortals gives. So nothing without great work gives life to mortals. So nothing without great work gives life to, okay, I guess, okay, it gives life to mortals. Let's talk about this one here. So nothing, and then without great work, without great labor. So sine is always followed by the ablative. So second declension, ablative singular is O. So there it is. But then work is third declension. So third declension, ablative singular is E. So labore, so sine magno labore. But then here's our subject. Nothing gives. So I guess you could say also life gives nothing to mortals without great effort. So actually that sounds a little bit better. I kind of sense that. So life gives nothing to mortals without great work or without great effort. So life gives nothing to mortals without great work, or literally great effort. Yeah, that one's okay. There we go. So because this is our subject, how do we know that? Because it ends in A, which nominative, first declension, letter A. So that is our subject. Dot we had in chapter 1. So life gives nothing to mortals without great effort. So mortalibus, that is third declension, dative plural. So dative plural is ibus. So remember, dative is to or for whom something is done. So we put it all together. There we go. All right, we're going to stop right there. So we'll kind of skip those last two. And then here we're going to talk about the longer passage. So let me go ahead and oops, I can type here. So this actually is a famous sad story in the history of Rome. It ultimately led to the fall of the monarch and the rise of the republic in the 6th century. So it's many Romans throughout the history of the republic and even beyond, they reference this. In fact, Livy is the great Roman historian. Here's a brief remark on his importance. Is the one who notes it in this context on his De Urbe Condito, on the founding of Rome, very famous book in Roman history and historiography more generally. So if you go on to study history in a PhD program, perhaps you will come across Livy as one of the great historians methodologically and content-wise in the history of Western civilization. So let's see, do they give us any? So here, yeah, so Lucius Tarquinius Superbus was Rome's last king and an Etruscan Colatinos, a Roman nobleman, according to legend. The rape of Lucretia was a precipitating factor that led to the overthrow of the Tarquin dynasty, the end of the Etruscan rule and the monarchy itself, and the establishment of the Roman Republic in 509 BC. And of course, the Republic would, in one sense, collapse or come to an end, finally with the Battle of Actium in 31 BC and the reinvention of Rome as an empire with Caesar Augustus and the Pax Augusta. So let's take a look at this here. So Tarquinius Superbus erat rex Romanorum ex Sextus Tarquinius erat filius malos tyranni, Sextus Lucretiam uxorum Colatani rapuit et femina bona propter magna memorum virtutis se nicavit. Romani antiqui virtutem animosque Locritiae impelladibant et Tarquinius culpibant. So what we have here is that Tarquinius Superbus was king of the Romans, and Sextus Tarquinius was, um, I guess, the bad son of the tyrant. Sextus, let's see, raped Lucretia, the wife of Collatinus. Collatinus. So the wife of Collatinus, and the good woman, because of her love of virtue, killed herself. Ancient Romans were always praising the virtue and courage of Lucretia, and were blaming the Tarquinians. Here, the entire royal family were blamed for that immoral, wicked deed. All right, so let's put this into English for you here. So Tarquinius Superbus was king of the Romans. So Tarquinius was king of the Romans. So let's take a look at that Latin here. So this one's fairly straightforward. So Tarquinius Superbus was, erat is imperfect form of to be. So Ramares erat, Ramas erates erat, you had that earlier in the book. So Tarquinius Superbus was king, and then of the Romans. So here is second declension, genitive plural. So Romanorum, Romanus. So of the Romans, remember genitive means of. And Sextus Tarquinius was the bad son of the tyrant. So let's see, what is the, okay, just confirming the punctuation. And Tarquinius, or Sextus Tarquinius, excuse me. And Sextus Tarquinius was the, you could even say wicked son, but we'll just say bad son of the tyrant. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So in Sextus Tarquinius was the bad son, the malus filius, and then of the tyrant. So again, there's another good chance to review our genitive of the tyrant. So malus filius tyranni, the bad son of the tyrant. So there's nominative and genitive. Sextus, and then here we got to pay attention to our endings. So we know that Sextus is the subject, Lucretia is the direct object. How do we know that? Because of am. So it tells us that Lucretia is the object of this verb. So Sextus raped Lucretia. So this one, although this one, yeah, they're actually using, we haven't had past tense yet, but they're actually using it in the past tense. Just want to confirm that. So we go back here is, let's see here. Okay. So Sextus raped Lucretia, and then here we have an appositive describing who's, and she is the son of Collatinus, or not the son, but the wife. Yeah. The wife of Collatinus. Let's see, did I spell that right here? I got to be honest, some of these Roman names, especially in social political history, I don't. So I'm going to confirm that. Collatinus. That is an A. Okay. So that one is just a comment on the grammar in that one real quick. Uxorum is third declension accusative singular, agreeing with the accusative form of Lucretia. And then of Collatinus is second declension genitive singular. So that's where we're getting the of. And then we get, and the woman and the good woman, so the femina bona. So, and the good woman. And then what makes her good? Well, we're about to find here. Because of her great love of virtue. So, because of her great love of virtue. So propter, again, always requires the accusative. So magnum, that's second declension, accusative singular. Amorum, that's third declension, accusative singular. Of virtue, that's third declension, genitive singular. So em, is. And sure enough, em, is. So because of her great love of virtue, killed herself. So here we're going to follow the vocab here. Killed herself. And then ancient Romans. Rome was a people of great memory, constant memory. It's one of the things that made Rome great. They always try to remember where they came from. Ancient Romans were always praising, so semper laudebant, were always praising, so this is going back to earlier chapters as well. And then praising what? The virtue and courage of Lucretia. The virtue and courage of Lucretia. Now it is interesting how the Latin has animos, which is in the plural, but again doesn't mean minds or spirits. It means courage. Courage is something that seems to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Certainly not a simple sense of will. It seems to have something more robustly developed, and so perhaps the plural form of the grammar, I think, indicates that. At any rate, of course, courage is a virtue, as Aristotle points out, among others. And then they were always blaming the Tarquinians, or you can even say the entire royal family. And the Romans were always blaming the Tarquinians. Can also mean in terms of just the Roman hatred of monarch. One of the interesting things that Americans share with the Romans is a hate of monarch. But if you want to say the entire royal family, that's fine too. Let's see. I think And so they were always blaming the entire. So I put in the always again. I think it makes sense. We're blaming the royal family. All right. So that is this week's lesson. We're not going to do the other reading in this one. As always, feel free to reach out to me. And this chapter, I think, is a good chapter because it's pointed in its grammar topic, namely third declension. But you definitely want to take your time working through some of these examples and getting more and more comfortable with the Latin noun declensions. Valete omnes.